Well, welcome back to the this week's podcast on the first journey of Paul. And on today, we're going to be looking at Lystra, from a worship to stones. You know, crowds can change quickly. One moment they lift you up, and the next they turn. And today's story is not just dramatic, it's unsettling. Because in the city of Lystra, Paul the Apostle and Barnabas will experience both extremes, worship and violence. See, Lystra is different. There's no synagogue is mentioned and no familiar starting point. And this is new territory. Pagan, unfamiliar, spiritual distance from everything that Paul has known. And yet, even here, the message begins. Not with structure, but with a moment. A man sitting, unable to walk, disabled from birth, and invisible to most, but not to Paul. See, Paul looks at him intently, seeing something that others don't, and that is faith. And then he speaks, "Stand up on your feet." And instantly the man jumps, walks and moves. For the first time in his life, the impossible becomes visible, and the crowd sees it. But here's where everything turns, because the crowd doesn't just react, they interpret, and they get it wrong, completely wrong. They begin shouting in their own language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they call Zeus, and Paul Hermes, messengers of the gods. And suddenly, this isn't a crowd anymore. It's a movement. A priest is summoned, sacrifices are prepared, garlands, bulls, ceremony. They're ready to worship. So let that just settle in, because Paul and Barnabas didn't come to be honoured. They came to point beyond themselves. But the crowd is pulling them in the opposite direction. And for a brief moment, everything looks like success, attention, influence and power. But it's built on misunderstanding. See, Paul and Barnabas realise what's happening, and they react immediately. Not with pride and not with acceptance, but with urgency. They tear their clothes, a visible public act of grief, and they rush into the crowd. Why are they doing this? Their voices cut through the noise. "We are human, just like you." And then they redirected everything, not to themselves, but to the living God, the Creator, the one who gives rain, crops, season and life. And they tried to pull the crowd back to truth, to reality. But even then, it's barely enough to stop the sacrifice. The moment hangs fragile. It's tense and it's unstable, because crowds built on emotion can shift without warning. And then it happens. Without transition, without warning, opponents arrive. From Pisidian Antioch to Iconium, the resistance was followed them, and they turned the crowd. So the same voices that shouted gods now turn against them, and Paul is dragged out of the city and stoned, left for dead, and the crowd disperses. Silence falls, and for a moment it looked like the mission ends here. But then, movement, because Paul gets up, bruised, broken and alive, and instead of running away, he goes back into the city. Not to prove something, not out of recklessness, but because the mission is still alive. Lystra confronts us with the same something raw. Public opinion is unstable. It can elevate you and destroy you in the same breath. And if your identity is built on approval, you won't survive the shift. But Paul doesn't anchor himself in the crowd, but not in their praise and not in their rejection. He anchors himself in the mission. So here's the question to carry with you today. When voices around you change, what stays steady? Because in Lystra, everything changed, but the mission didn't. So next time, we follow the journey forward, not just to new places, but back through old ones, strengthening, encouraging, building something that lasts.